Well, to give more insight into this reduction on import duties on vehicles and, of course, the impact on the automobile industry in the country, I have the Chairman, Motor Vehicles and Miscellaneous Assembly Sector of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, is Mr. Robert Ugbaja. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Ugbaja.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.
Yes, the government of former President Jonathan introduced the National Automotive Council with aim of encouraging and promoting local manufacturing of cars. Now, this resulted in high duty tariff of 35% levy and 35% duty on fully built unit vehicles. That's talking about new cars, while semi-knockdown vehicles that were imported into the countries, imported to be assembled in the countries, attracted lower duty payments. 6 years after, what do you think about this process?
Well, I think the whole policy it was a complete disaster. Okay, disaster in the sense that as a nation, Nigeria cannot continue to be dumping ground for discarded vehicles from other clients. After 60 years of independence, Nigeria should be in a position to have a viable, virile automobile manufacturing sector. Well, what happened in the past was that the policies were formulated without proper consultations with the stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are the manufacturers, the users of the vehicles, the providers of after-sales service. These people were not consulted. And civil servants just sat in their offices, came up with a policy and foisted it on the people. And of course, it was doomed to fail, and it did fail. It did not succeed in the first place because, number one, local manufacturers were not given the correct enabling environment for them to thrive. And two also, when you produce new vehicles, people have to buy them. Who are the people? The civil servants, the workers. And today I will ask this rhetorical question. How many Nigerian workers today can afford to pay 5 million naira minimum to buy a brand new vehicle? So those who conceptualized this policy would have thought about all this in the first place for investment to come into the industry. That means there has to be adequate volume for the manufacturers. This will have to be the incentive for them to invest in the industry. If you look at the number of brand new vehicles that were imported during the period, was not more than 10,000 units. And who will invest money to manufacture just 10,000 units? How will you recover your investments and all that? First, there should have been a thought for a purchasing scheme for new vehicles. Nobody thought about it seriously. It was not clearly stated in the policy, and the modalities spelled out. And why the policy also was doomed to fail was also NAC, the National Automotive Council, who midwife this policy, came out and licensed about 32 or more vehicle manufacturing companies. It has never happened anywhere, not even in the United States. Today, they do not have 20, 30, and now we are talking about 35 or more license. So basically, what they did was that anybody who was a trader had a license to import vehicles with concession. Of course, taking advantage of the provision that if you bring one in CKD condition, you can bring two fully assembled. So basically, they were trading. So there has to be a complete rethinking and overhaul of this policy. And this policy, for it to work, the manufacturers have to be involved in drafting this policy. We have to take into account those who will buy the vehicles. You see, I can give you an example. India today, India is becoming a major manufacturing country for vehicles. But India did not start with 35 different brands of vehicles. It's impossible. Nobody can do that. India started with just two, the Ambassador and one other vehicle. Even the Germans, after the First World War and so on, they started with the People's Car, which later became the Volkswagen Beetle. You start from there. You don't start with licensing 35 people to 35 companies to manufacture these vehicles, set up assembly plants for 10,000 new vehicles. It's impossible. The parts you need for the 10,000 new vehicles can be produced in 1 week. And then what happens? And that's why investment did not come in. So the policy was doomed to fail from the beginning.
Mr. Ogbaja, allow me to interject to you and ask you this. The latest policy review, as contained in the 2020 Finance Act, has been designed to reduce the applicable levies and duties on vehicles with the aim of mitigating rising transport costs, boost road transportation, and the mass transit industry. Now, you're talking about sustaining. How sustainable is this new policy? And what are the effects on manufacturers?
Well, the effects on manufacturers is very negative. Very negative. Negative in the sense that when the auto policy came out, companies were encouraged to invest. They invested in setting up the assembling lines. Some invested in setting up real manufacturing lines involving painting, welding, and so on. And the incentive for them was that protection. Countries have to countries who develop their own auto industry shut the borders for a while to allow the local industry to develop, grow, before they open the borders. So what's going to happen to those companies? Most of those companies today are regretting making such investments because there is probably, when a fully built up vehicle attracts duty, let's say for transportation, attracts duty of 10%, and then you have to bring in your CKD, pay the import duty at the port, pay your VAT, do all the. It's impossible. You cannot compete. There has to be this element of protection. As long as that was I think the thinking of those who drafted the policy in the first place. Today, the manufacturers are all counting their losses. They are counting their losses seriously. Because where is the incentive for them to invest? Why should they invest when you can equally bring out, just bring in any vehicle? By the way, the argument that because we want to lower the prices of vehicles, which vehicles are we lowering the prices? We are talking of lowering the prices of Tokumbo vehicles, the used vehicles, not necessarily new vehicles. Now, it's a question for the nation to answer itself. Does it want to remain perpetually a dumping ground for used vehicles? Has it become the norm and the acceptable thing for us, the best thing for us in the nation, to ride vehicles that have been discarded from other places. We must have a deliberate plan to develop our own industry, build our own industries. You see, the initial plan in the third development plan of 1975 to 1980 was even more ambitious and better conceived than the most recent one. That one saw the establishment of four assembly plants, four major assembly plants, the Volkswagens, the Leyland, and so on and so forth. And because there were few, you had the benefit of volume. The four, catering for the needs of the entire country, could invest. Even before government went back, the policies somersault as usual again. And then we started having, open doors for vehicles, all kinds of vehicles and all kinds used vehicles to come in. Local past industries has started growing. You should ask yourself what happened to the exiled battery factories, the Nokaco factories that were making automotive wiring harnesses, the ISO glass, they were making the windscreens, and so on. All those industries, we had industries making oil and fuel filters with drive belts and so on. They've all gone, they've all died because of inconsistency in the policies and so on. So it is a deliberate decision we have to make. And somebody has to have the political will to say, look, as a nation, we must develop our own industries. It's not to make it easy, reduce the tariff, bring fiscal measures that will make importation of these vehicles we are importing. Look at how many new vehicles came into the country last year. Less than 20,000 brand new vehicles. The rest are all used Tokumbo vehicles. So first, we must start thinking of vehicle purchase schemes. Get the finance houses, get the banks, get institutions. There are specialized institutions who do this. I know that in South Africa, there is an institution for financing purchase of new vehicles. Civil servants like you and I can buy new vehicles and have very liberal payment terms and so on. We need to sit down. You don't get civil servants in their offices and then come up with a policy and throw it. Of course, and it fails. And by the way, who builds a house from the roof? We started building our houses from the roof, and we say it's auto police. Why will it succeed? Why I say building from the roof? You start from the base. Bring up the component manufacturing industries. Let them come up. Let them mature. Give them volume, not licensing 35 companies to assemble. Which country has 35 auto manufacturing companies? This is why it failed.
Now, this brings me back to policy somersaults. That's where we think we are almost wrapping up this discussion. I think we'll wrap it around that point where we look at issues around policy inconsistency. We see every government coming up with its own trade policies without building on established ones. Let's now look at investments. This will definitely scare investors. And what's the quantum of investments we are looking at, even for locals in the automobile industry? What's the quantum?
It's huge. You see, look at every economy, whether it's the American economy, the German economy, the Japanese economy. The contribution of the auto industry, the auto sector, is huge. You can't quantify it. You are not talking only of the original equipment manufacturers. We are talking about the component manufacturers. We are talking about the service elements, it's service shops. You are talking about, I mean, it's huge. It's huge. And until a time comes when we will sit down, discuss with the stakeholders, come up with a policy, it's only then that you can attract the necessary investment. And you don't attract investment if you don't have volumes. Nobody will invest if you can't get good volume. You can't come and invest only to produce 20,000 units. So we have a lot of work to do. And there has to be, look, the policy that started in the third development plan, if it was sustained, by now, I know companies that had achieved 23% local content at that time.
Wow.
By 1980, companies that have achieved about 17%, some going further. And there was a plan at that time to reach close to 70% local content by 1986. And suddenly, the policy was changed. I mean, there was a somersault. Then we started talking of trade liberalization and all that and all that. And that was what killed the Volkswagens, the Steers. Steer in Bauchi, they were assembling. They had gone far with tractors. Where are they today? NTM in Kano, Leyland in Ibadan. During that policy, if that policy was sustained, by now we would have gone beyond making the batteries and filters and belts. Even today, we don't even make the batteries again. We don't make filters. We don't make anything. We just become traders. And those who made the policy tell us, we want to make it cheap. Cheap for what? You are making cheap the Tokumbo. Just make the cheap for the Tokumbo. Where is the ambition of developing our own local automotive industry?
All right, it's a good way to leave it. Very interesting discussion there, Mr. Robert Ugwaja. I must thank you so much for your time. He is the chairman, Motor Vehicles and Miscellaneous Assembly Sector of Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. We know our regulators and our top government functions are also listening to us. And I think enough engagement, more engagement will be also be needed to be able to make your position known to them. And, they can always look at things and rejig some of these policies. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. We appreciate this. The continuous discussion will keep on talking about this as it goes on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All